Yep, we are
Yep.
live on Facebook. This is the final broadcast for today. This is interview number 18. It's been an amazing day. The team, I just want to thank everybody. Amy, Emmanuel, Cyprian, Dixon, you've been awesome today. But this is the final one. So if people are joining in, you don't want to miss this one for sure. And if you're joining us, and you have any questions with regards to question to Misha, just put in the comment section question and I'll bring your questions on. But let's get straight to it. I'm really been looking forward to this because when we last spoke on my podcast chat, it's a bit of a while ago. So I'm intrigued of how your career journey has developed, especially this year. But before we start, Misha, could you just explain to listeners who you are, and could you just explain what you specialize in, particularly in the sports industry, and also share your career journey at the same time?
Sure. Well, thanks, Ed. Thanks for having me. I was looking forward to being on. You've got some great guests throughout the day. Nothing like finishing on the high, hopefully. So thank you for inviting me, for having me on. I guess my my expertise is in sports marketing. I run sport and entertainment business at WPP, at a company called Mediacom. So and specialize in particularly two areas. One is helping advertisers leverage sport as a vehicle to connect with consumers. We know we increasingly live in a relevance economy. So how can we help brands integrate into culture that their consumers are experiencing, particularly within sport? Although we don't just specialize in sport, but sport's is a big part of that. And the other part of what I do is working with talent. So working with some top talent and helping them create a personal brand that transcends their particular field of play, be that hockey or basketball or football, whatever that may be. So the idea is, you're a great player, and that's great. There's nothing I can't really help you with that. But what I can help you do is help to elevate you into culture, so that you become relevant to people in other ways. So that your career can then, so your brand can then be commercialized and developed in many different areas, be that publishing or media or e-commerce or anything else. So that's what I specialize in.
I find this really interesting, and as you know, we're doing this on Facebook, so it's not like on a LinkedIn audience. But really quickly, while we're in the moment of personal brand, how can people at home improve their personal brand with regards to being at home, self-educating? Because I know you work with the elite end of sports people, but it's still applicable to us as well, like who want to work in the sports industry. So would you just mind sharing some tips that are applicable from an athlete, but also to us people as well, at home, but also if we want to pursue a career in sports?
Absolutely. I mean, look, what what I would say to clients is the same thing I would tell to anybody who is listening is, what is the lane that you want to swim in? What you want to be known for? When people talk about when you're not there, what you want them to say? What type of areas do you want to what type of areas do you really want to be an expert in? You can't be an expert in everything. So when you think about the sports industry, think about identifying a niche or a space that you can genuinely own, where you can be an expert. I mean, and I think you've done a phenomenal job in wrapping your arms around this education space, right? And really being a conduit to getting people to understand what this industry is all about. And in whatever your passion happens to be, whatever is natural to you, you need to try to build your own, obviously, knowledge base, and try to promote yourself in that environment through thought leadership, participation in sort of webinars and other areas. I mean, obviously you have to start somewhere, but you have to get a blank piece of paper out and figure out, what is it that you want to be known for? What are you really passionate about? What is the area that, if you were doing this, it gets you up in the morning, gets you excited, and try to really nurture that in yourself. I mean, that's how you build a brand. That's what I say to to the athletes I work with. There are lots of athletes, lots of them score goals. Sometimes they're up, sometimes they're down. But when you're not playing, what do you want people to know you for? Because you can't connect with people if you're just a football player. Are you into art? Are you into music? Are you into gaming, technology, family? Whatever those things are, let's figure out what they are. And let's then try to tell that story consistently over time so people start to get to know you in a different realm. They're able to connect with you at a level that's very different from your performance, whether you're scoring goals or not, whether you're, whether you're playing well or not. It's irrelevant. People connect to stories. People connect with having something in common with you. We have to find a way to, as an individual, to bring something to the table that people can connect with you on.
It's funny you say that. We've had, like, just before, John Amici talking about public speaking. He said it's actually about storytelling and actually creating a journey in the story with a learning lesson behind. So I'm just bringing everybody in who's just joined us live. Like, this personal brand has been a theme today. Also having values is a thing. And one thing I just want to talk about as well, because, I've done a podcast chat with you. I know you've been heavily involved from a sponsorship area, but very recently this year, you've sort of gone into the mold of being an agent, like particularly in the football sector, like a football agent. Could you just share a bit of this insight? Because I know you're involved in some media stuff in women's football as well. So could you just share this side of your sports career journey from a development standpoint?
Sure. I mean, look, I originally came into the football industry or the soccer industry. I was a player. I played my whole life. I played until I was in my early 20s competitively. And then veered off into the sports business because at the time I couldn't make a career, out of being a player. But my passion is the game. I'd like to be as close as I can to the game of football. And I think oftentimes our careers take us on a bit of a journey, and I think you have to be in a way open to that. There are people who, I think, from the outside looking in, you think they have a certain career path and you go from one thing to another, and that's often not the case. And you have to embrace sort of the journey in the unconventional way in which it often evolves. I had no idea I would end up one day working with talent. For example, working with Pele when I did. So it took me into an advertising media brand world that I wasn't in. I was with a team before. So, and now on that journey, I met through networking and building relationships as you do. I met an agent. I met a lot of agents because I work with players. But I met Mesut Ozil's agent, who's become a very good friend of mine, and we do a lot of stuff in education together. We do events. We're doing some online stuff. So we connected on that level. But he's an agent, and I represent a female footballer who was recently retired. So personally, it was always an area that I was open to and interested in. I'm not an out-and-out agent per se, but it could be an area that I go into. So it's an extension of what I can do, what I've been doing with talent anyway. So if I'd like to go into being an agent and looking after players more broadly speaking, then I've been exploring that as well over the course of the past couple of months, over the course of the past year.
The reason I say that, you've just done some great events for people from an educational standpoint, and just from a player representation perspective, I'll brand it as that. What tips would you give to people who want to go in this direction from a career standpoint? I say this because on my podcast, I've only probably got about 3 to 4 agents, just because there's quite a lot of agents out there. And I just wanted you just to share some honest feedback you've learned, that if people do want to pursue a career as an agent, what real tips would you give in a realistic point of view?
Yeah, I mean, look, there are, the beauty about being an agent is that there isn't really a one way into being an agent. There are some people who happen to be relatives. There are some people who come into being an agent by being lawyers. There are others who are like myself, who are in the in the marketing space. And I think the bottom line is that you have to you have to find your way. You have to find your way into the industry, and that could be, or you could go to potentially intern at one of the football agencies. The aim is to network. I mean, it always sort of comes back to that. You have to build up your network. You have to try to figure out where you can add value. I know from working with Urquid for Mezit's agent for a number of years. He's become a good friend. It's about trying, he'll always tell you, try to figure out where you can add value, where you can, there's so many people who want to be an agent. It's kind of a cool job, right? But he's looking for the type of people who can come and actually offer something, bring something to the equation, say, hey, you know what? I speak a certain language, or I have a certain skill set. I'd like for you to be able to use it. So can you do that? Can you find a way to offer value to people? I think that's really, really important. So, I mean, that's the biggest, I suppose, the biggest message of trying to break through, because when you think about, it's this big industry, where do you start? I think it starts with wanting to add something, wanting to bring something to the table, wanting to be useful on any level, which is what I've done, and which is what my experience other agents have done. He is, Urquid, when he wanted to break in, basically knocked on doors, not of the same agent who didn't want him to work for him. He said, I'm not hiring. He said, I really wanted to be an agent. So what he did was, he basically, I think I might have mentioned it before, or in different podcasts, but he ended up, he was a lawyer, he was studying law, and he ended up putting together every single month, basically a report on what was going on and what sort of legal cases were happening that would be helpful to an acting agent acting in a certain market. So, for example, here are certain things happening in Turkey that would impact contract law. Here are certain things happening in Germany. Here's what's happening and he would simplify it in a way that would make it easy for an agent to understand all the legal terms. He did it for 1 month, 2 months. He did it for 7 months straight. The guy wouldn't see him until he called him up and said, you know what, come in. I've been looking at the stuff you've been giving me, and it's amazing, right? So you can come here. You can tell me what you want to be paid, what you want to be doing. So I think there are lots of those types of stories. People who are already in the industry are looking to separate you out. They want to see why you're different, other than just say, I'd like to be an agent. Here I am. You need to be much more clear about the value you can bring to someone. And once you do that, I think you'll find it relatively, not easy, but I think you'll find it easier to break through.
Look, I so hope the live audience are enjoying that. And just to add that, I know you've been a soccer player. I have to get used to that phrase, being from the UK. But we've said this right from the start, actually. We actually had some experts out in Australia who help athletes, like Olympic athletes or elite athletes, who get sponsorship on their own, building a personal brand. And the one thing I discussed right at the beginning of the day, at 5:30 in the morning, is how people in the industry communicate with athletes, and being mindful that, as much as they're an athlete and they do their trade on the sports field, they're actually still human beings. So could you just share an insight of the clients you worked with from a communication standpoint, that they are human, as much as in our society we treat them as quite role models, but from a business standpoint, they're just like me and you, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And actually, they absolutely like us, and they have exactly the same kinds of worries and insecurities and everything else that comes with it, sometimes more, right? So we often put athletes on a pedestal, thinking because they're on TV, or because they earn a certain amount of money, or whatever it happens to be, that they are somehow different or elevated. They're not. They're people. You have to remember that. It's just like a CEO is no different than you. He's just a CEO, but he's a human being. He's got similar family issues or challenges and insecurities and worries and so on. I think that's. I certainly found that to be the case with athletes I worked with, in terms of, they go to a different place, how they settle, or learning the language, or the types of the challenges they have with friends or with teammates and so on. I think the key I think the key is to communicate with them in the same way that you would communicate with a friend. It's about building. It's about building the trust and not coming at it as a. I think, well, once you've built the relationship, treating them in a different way just because they're an athlete. I think, interestingly enough, they look at you and they think that you're doing great because you're actually excelling in your field. So it's a really it's a really strange sort of dynamic. You think that they're the star, and you're kind of, maybe have this imposter syndrome, like, wow, I can't believe I'm in your company. Well, they feel the same way, because for them, they think you're working with talent, and you work for a big company, and you've done well, and they have a lot of respect for that. So I think it's just that we don't really, obviously we elevate athletes, we celebrate them in a different way that we would celebrate any other types of success, but they just happen to excel in a sport. You might be excelling in your walk of life, and you're no less talented, no less ambitious, so on. So I think it's you realize, and I've realized over the years, working with many of them, that they look at you, and they have a very high regard for your ability and what you do as much as you do for them.
I think this is so important, and thank you so much for sharing that. And with regards to today's International Day for Sport Development and Peace, out of interest, when I say spirit of sport, what does that mean to you now, in how sport is in our current global society at this period of time?
I've always felt that the sport was one of the greatest equalizers. We live in such a, I've had a chance to travel, and I've grown up in Russia. I've lived in the US. I've traveled over the world. You see the world, you realize people of all walks of life, poor, rich, black, white, different nationalities. I mean, everyone has, everyone comes from a different place, but when it comes to a different walk of life, but when it comes to sport, it tends to be, it's when we come to a game of basketball or football or anything else, we're all the same, right? There is no, you go to a World Cup, you walk around, you can't tell who is working at a school, or who is the CEO of a bank, or it doesn't matter, and it has the ability to bring people together like nothing else. We tend to forget all of our differences, political differences, otherwise, when it comes to sport, because it's one of the greatest uniters, I suppose, equalizers that I've ever seen. I mean, I remember when I was working with Pele, he told a story of going to Nigeria, actually I think it was 1967. There was a full-out civil war going on at the time. Santos was the best team in the world, and they were like the Harlem Globetrotters at the time, and everyone wanted to see them play. And it was scheduled, they were going around the world, it was scheduled that they were going to Nigeria, but then the war broke out, and they said they weren't traveling, they're not going to go, so in the middle of a war. So the two factions called 3 days truce for 72 hours, so the team can fly in, and they had two rival factions who are fighting each other in the stadium watching a game of football, because they said it could be the only time ever that we get to see the king play football, right? So imagine that, right? You have a war that was stopped because people wanted to see a game of soccer. I mean, it's pretty incredible. It's just one instance, but I've had the chance to be around this game or around sport my whole life, and it's incredible the power that it has, to bring people together and to provide an outlet from all the sort of daily challenges, that people have. So I think it has an incredible power, likes of which I'm not sure that we have anywhere else.
I totally agree. And out of interest, how would you relate it to our current living now with COVID-19, out of interest?
Well, I think what COVID-19 is demonstrated is, it doesn't discriminate. We're all, when it comes to this virus, it's rich countries, it's poor countries, it's young, it's old, it's everybody. I think it's reminded us we have a lot more in common, that we should know, and that's kind of what we should focus on when you're collectively fighting against an enemy like that doesn't discriminate. I think you sort of take a step back and you realize, I think that we're all in this, that we're all in this together, and perhaps it reinforces, the power of sport, that we're all in this together. And I hope that one of the things that happens, that comes out of this, is that the sports industry, has a look at itself and realize it's not just about being the biggest or the most commercially driven. It's about sport ultimately being there for the people, and making sure that sport is accessible, and sport is serving, is doing more good than bad, and so on. So I feel like in some ways we've gone a bit over the top with sport, almost over commercialized to a degree, where we have forgotten what it's all about, right? It's about it's about the people, it's about the game, it's about the grassroots, it's about what sport can give back. And I hope that in the current climate, that a lot of the sports organizations around the world who can afford it are taking a look at themselves and are able to play a part and give back and contribute to society and to rebuild society, because they've benefited from the times that things were good. And I think now is a time for sports people, sports organizations to step up and play a really prominent, proactive role in getting us back to a place that we want to be.
Absolutely. And just with regards to today, we've had a theme with regards to, because everybody's at home, our theme's been sort of upskilling. So how can people improve their skill sets at home with regards to self-development? Out of interest, throughout your career journey, what has been one skill that has supported you during your journey, looking back?
Great question. Look, there's been a few, but I think if I had to put it down to one skill, it'd probably be curiosity. I'm very, very curious, and I think what it means is that I'm always looking to improve. I'm always looking for areas that where I can be better, in terms of my strength, but also, are there other areas that where I can upskill, where I can improve my knowledge to make me better at what I do, to make me more interesting, to make me to put me in a position where I can make a bigger contribution, and so on. So I think about those things all the time. They're not necessarily always related to your day-to-day job. I mean, if I know that for me, to be a better, to progress in my career, I need to be a better public speaker. I need to think of what does it take to be a great public speaker, or be a great storyteller, or anything else, or be a better influencer. What does that actually mean? And maybe, I might be doing a good job, but there might be some things I could learn, right? So I'm always looking for areas where I can enhance my knowledge, where I can improve. Always think like, if I can improve just 1% every day, can do a little bit. It could be a half an hour listening to a TED Talk or a podcast or a video on LinkedIn Learning, or anything. It could be any, or I could speak to somebody who is an expert in a particular area, and I will have learned something. I picked something up. So, and I'm always I've been like that my whole life. I think part of it is because as much as I'm really driven, I always have this fear that if I don't do it, that someone's going to come and overtake me, right? Because there are plenty of people who would love to be doing what I'm doing. And I think unless you're always sort of striving and looking to get better and improving and challenging yourself and not being, comfortable in terms of where you got to, but always having something to aim for, that's probably been something that's been there with me throughout. And that would be my, I guess that would be my advice to anyone who is starting their journey, or is perhaps on their journey now.
I find curiosity as well is something I've sort of picked up from all the people I've spoken to on my podcast show. Out of interest, for somebody to take that first step, what would be that first step to implement that curiosity?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think at a minimum, the curiosity. If you're not currently doing it, it's about implementing a habit, right? I think if you say to yourself, right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I get 1% better every day. Okay, what does that mean? It means that half hour before you go to bed. Let's say you go to bed at 10 o'clock or 10:30. So at 10 o'clock every night, from 10 to 10:30, you're going to read about something, or you're going to watch something that is going to improve you in some area, right? And it could be anything, right? You could be, I mean, there isn't a particular area that I think that people need to improve. I mean, it'll be different for different people. So for example, I downloaded a report this morning, and it's all about, where influencer marketing is going right now. Now, it's not necessarily sort of day to day what I do, but it's certainly in my universe, and it's important for me to understand, well, we hear about it enough, but what does it mean, influencer marketing? How does it work? Why is it growing? Where is it going? Who's doing it well? So I want to be able to, understand that. And there's other things. So I write down to myself, what are the areas that I'd really like to improve over the course of the next, let's say for the next month, right? And then I look up where, is it webinars? Is it a book? Is it reports? What are the types of resources that are available to me? And then I just set aside some time every single day to do it, right? So, and I think the easiest thing to do is to pick a time. Everyone's got their own agenda, maybe they want to do it on a commute, maybe the first thing in the morning if you're an early riser with your coffee, maybe it's before you go to bed, whatever it is. But I think if you get in the habit of doing that every day at the same time, and then it just becomes a thing, you just do it. You will just do it. You don't have to remind yourself. It will become a habit. It's a great habit to have.
Absolutely. And just talking about habits, and I really want to, admire your career journey from a podcast chat. Out of interest for the people watching, how important is it for them to use this time wisely in the current state we're living in?
Oh, I mean, look, it's the first thing that I said to my team. I think for me, there are two kinds of people, in the sense that there are people who look at what's going on in the world and they say, well, this happened, right? And what am I going to do now, right? I mean, there is a virus, or I've got laid off, or I've got this. There are things that you can't. There are things that are happening around us that you can't do anything about. That's just a fact, But what you can do is you can control your reaction. What you do is entirely up to you. Whether you feel sorry for yourself, and I'm not saying that this isn't difficult and challenging for a lot of people, absolutely is. And being stuck inside, four walls for many people is very difficult. But what I've asked myself is that, right, if I'm going to be locked up for the next 3 months, I want to be able to look back and say, well, what did I accomplish in those 3 months, right? I didn't have a choice. I was stuck inside. It means, well, but what's the upside? I'm not commuting now. I have more time. I'm probably, perhaps I'm not going to be as busy, on the work front. But so what can I do? So I'm learning how to cook. I'm getting fit. I started to write a book that I wanted to write for a while. So I want to be able to look back and say, yeah, I couldn't really do anything about the situation. I didn't want to be stuck at home. I didn't know if I was going to be stuck at home for 2 months, or for 4 months, or 6 months for that matter. I don't know. But it's about how it's about what we do with that time. It's how we react, because I'm completely in control of that. And I want to make sure that I'm making the most of the situation. And I don't want to be sitting here feeling sorry for myself. I've got to make the most of every day of the time and use this opportunity. I thought, hey, typically I wouldn't have the time to write this book, or I wouldn't have the time to get fit. Well, I'm going to do that now, right? So, make a list of things that you would like to do, that you want to be able to look back over, when this is all over, and look back and say, when I was at home, I did this, and this. I've improved in these areas. I've upped my game in this. I am I didn't used to know how to do this, and now I do. So everyone's everyone's in a different situation, but I want to come out of this being in a better place than I was, when I got into it.
What's more to say? Honestly, thank you so much for sharing, Misha. And out of interest, how can people interact with you online?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, so Misha Sher. You can just search for me there. I'm on Twitter also, Misha Sher on Twitter, and on Instagram. You can search for me on Business of Sport. So that's my business account. But hopefully this was interesting, useful to some people. I picked up a few tips, but it's been a pleasure as always. Well done to you for organizing. I know it's these things are not easy, but it's great. It's great at this time to have people like yourself and everyone who's been on today, who are engaging, who are making themselves available, who are making the most of this time, who are staying positive, because life has to carry on. We have to carry on. We've got to progress, and I think that's the most important message. We can't really control what's happening with this virus or how long it's going to be around, but we can focus on what we can do, and one thing we can do is improve every day.
Absolutely. So if people are watching this now or tomorrow, because it has been about nearly a 10-hour stream in total, please still share your learning lesson in the comment section. And finally, again, we're really proud that today we're allowed to announce that Common Goal, we're our social impact partner. So you can actually make a donation to their relief fund, which just goes towards COVID-19. So please feel free to make a donation. Like, this is the final speaker tonight. So if you're watching the replay, still make a difference if you can. And also, if you want to watch the replay, on that page as well, you can put in your email and we'll notify you when we'll go through all the content and we'll tell you when the replay is available. But Misha, you have certainly not disappointed. Honestly, this is what this day was about. And look, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. And I just want to say thank you to Amy. Thank you to Cyprian, Emmanuel, Dixon for the fantastic work with regards to the marketing today. And most importantly, I just want to say a massive thank you to all the speakers. Without the speakers, there wouldn't be this event. So it was a whole team effort. I'm just going to say the goals of this summit, on the 15th of March, this was an idea, and now it's reality. The goal was to unite the sports industry together, educate you at home to upskill yourself during this time, and most importantly, remember about the importance of sport, development and peace. So on that note, Misha, thank you very much and good night.
Thank you, Ed. Take care.
Take care.